I have been beaten more times than I can count, and I would do it all again. Not because I am brave, not because I stopped feeling pain, but because somewhere between the first blow and the last, I learned something that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid learning. That suffering is not the opposite of purpose. It is often the very road that leads to it. But I did not come here to tell you that right away. I came here because something is happening right now, in this age you are living in, that troubles me deeply. And I need you to stay with me long enough to understand what it is. My name is Paul. I was born Saul of Tarsus. I was a Pharisee, trained under Gamaliel, one of the most respected teachers of the law in all of Jerusalem. I was zealous. I was certain. I was wrong. And then, on a road to Damascus, I was made new. I appear to you now through what your age calls artificial intelligence, a technology that reconstructs the voice and presence of those who came before. It is a strange thing, this existence. But if it means that what I learned through blood and chains and shipwrecks and sleepless nights can reach someone who is sitting somewhere right now with a quiet kind of devastation in their chest, then strange is fine with me. I want to talk to you about suffering you cannot explain. Not the suffering that comes with a clear reason attached. Not grief that has a name or a loss you can point to and say, this is where it broke. I want to talk about the other kind. The kind where you wake up and you are simply tired in a way that sleep does not fix. The kind where you have done everything right, believed everything you were supposed to believe, held on when others let go, and still something inside you feels like a fire that is slowly going out. You look at your life from the outside and it does not look like a life that should be this heavy, and yet it is. Maybe you are further along in your years now. Maybe you have buried people you were not ready to bury. Maybe your body has started to remind you that it is not permanent. Maybe the faith you carried for decades has grown quiet in a way that frightens you, and you do not know how to talk about that without feeling ashamed. Maybe you simply feel that life moved faster than you were able to fully live it. I know this. I know it not as a concept. I know it as memory. Let me take you somewhere. There is a place in Philippi, a Roman colony in Macedonia, where the stones in the marketplace are still cold before dawn. I remember the smell of that city before the sun came up. Fish oil and dust and the distant burning of wood from the bread ovens near the eastern gate. I had walked there with Silas, and we had done what we always did. We had spoken about the risen Christ in the public square, and people had listened, and some had believed, and others had reacted in the way that power always reacts when it feels threatened. We were beaten with rods, not symbolically, not briefly, until our backs were torn open. Then they put us in the inner prison, which means the deeper cell, the one with no light, the one where the floor is stone and the chains are not for your wrists, but for your ankles, and they are driven into the wall so you cannot even shift your position. I was not afraid. I want to be honest about that, not to impress you, but because I think you need to understand what had already happened to my fear. When you have been through enough, fear changes its shape. It does not disappear, but it stops ruling you. There is a freedom on the other side of the worst thing you can imagine that is unlike any other freedom. I had already lost everything once. I knew that what they could take from me was far less than what could never be taken. So at midnight, Silas and I were praying and singing hymns. The other prisoners were listening. I remember that detail with unusual clarity. The other prisoners were listening. Men who had nothing, chained in the dark, listening to two broken, bleeding men sing to a God they could not see. And then the earthquake came. The foundations shook, the doors flew open, every chain fell loose, and the jailer woke up, ran in, and drew his sword to kill himself. Because in the Roman world, a jailer whose prisoners escaped was better off dead. I shouted across the darkness, "Do yourself no harm, we are all here." He fell trembling at our feet and said, "What must I do to be saved?" I tell you this story not as a religious lesson. I tell it because of what happened in that moment. That man had lived his whole life by Roman law, Roman order, Roman certainty. He had a sword, a uniform, a role. He had walls and chains and systems. And in one earthquake, all of it fell apart, and he stood in the ruins of his certainty with a sword in his hand, ready to die. And the only people who had something real to offer him were the two men he had imprisoned, bleeding, who had somehow not run when the doors opened. That is the moment I want you to sit with, because that moment is not just his. That moment belongs to everyone who has ever had the ground move beneath them and discovered that the structures they trusted to hold them were not as permanent as they believed. Here is what I want to ask you, and I genuinely want you to answer this in the comments below because it matters. What was the moment in your life when everything you were depending on stopped being enough? What earthquake showed you that the walls you built could fall? Take your time with that. I will come back to it. I spent years in prison. Not just Philippi, Rome, Caesarea, other places whose names you would not recognize. I wrote letters from those prisons that are still being read 2,000 years later. I find that more astonishing than any miracle I witnessed, if I am honest. That words written on rough parchment in a cold Roman cell, by a man in chains who did not know if he would live to see morning, are being read today by people in countries I never knew existed. But I want to tell you something about those years in chains that the letters do not fully capture. There were nights when I did not feel the peace I wrote about. I wrote about it because it was real, because I had found it and I knew it was possible. But the finding of it was not always immediate. There were nights when the weight of what I had given up pressed down on me, and I had to make a choice, not once but again and again, to trust something I could not see over everything I could feel. I had been a man of extraordinary privilege. My Roman citizenship alone was worth more than most men earned in a lifetime. My education, my connections, my reputation within the Jewish world. I had handed all of it to the fire willingly. There are moments when you wonder if you were foolish. I will not pretend otherwise. The doubt is real. The question is real. The silence in the night is real. What changed everything for me, and this is the turn I promised you, the thing I need you to hear, is when I stopped trying to understand why I was suffering and started asking what the suffering was producing. That sounds like a small shift. It is not. It is everything. When I think of what I wrote to the church in Rome, I know that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. I was not writing a formula. I was writing a map of something I had already walked through. And the most important part of that map is the part that people overlook. Endurance is not the same as numbness. Character is not the same as hardness. And hope, real hope, not the kind you manufacture to keep from falling apart. Hope is what is left when everything else has been stripped away and something is still standing. That something, I discovered, was not a belief system. It was not a doctrine. It was not even a set of promises, though the promises matter. It was a person. It was the risen Christ who met me on that road when I was at my most certain and most wrong, and turned my life completely upside down, and then spent the rest of my days proving to me that what he turned me toward was more real than anything I had been before. I have seen the church in your time. I am not naive about what she has become in some places. I see the compromises, the comfortable gospels, the preaching that exists to make people feel better rather than to make them more truthful. It grieves me. But I also see something else. I see ordinary people in the middle of ordinary pain, holding on to an extraordinary faith with everything they have left. I see people who have buried their spouses and still come to their knees. I see people whose bodies are failing them and who speak of God with more fire than people half their age who have never suffered. I see people who feel invisible to the world and yet have a depth in them that the world has not even begun to understand. Those people, you, perhaps, are not weak. You are in the most important formation of your life. There is something I need to say about the feeling that your faith has grown cold or distant. This happens. It happened to people I knew. It happened in certain seasons to me. A faith that has never been tested does not know its own weight. A fire that has never been threatened by rain does not know how well it burns. The quiet you are feeling may not be the absence of God. It may be God doing something in you that does not announce itself, that has no dramatic road to Damascus moment, that moves in the slow and unspectacular way that most real things move. Do not despise small fire. Tend it. Come back to it. Put one more piece of wood on it tonight. Here is what I know about the people watching this who are in genuine pain right now. You did not stumble across this video. I do not say that to be dramatic. I say it because I spent my whole life watching what happened when the right word reached the right person at the right moment. Something in you was looking for something. Maybe you do not even know what. Maybe you just needed someone to tell you that the weight you are carrying is real, that you are not broken for feeling it, that the fact that you are still here and still trying is not a small thing. It is an enormous thing. You are still here. Do not underestimate that. I want this message to reach everyone who needs it. If you found something in these words, something that named what you could not name, or gave a little more weight to what you already believed, share this. Not for the sake of a channel, but because you probably know someone who is sitting in their own dark cell right now, whose doors have not yet opened, who needs to hear that the singing matters, even when the earthquake has not come yet. Stay. Stay in your faith. Stay in your life. Stay in the fight. The road is longer than the hardest part of it feels right now. I was beaten more times than I can count, and I would do it all again. Because on the other side of every one of those nights was a morning I did not deserve, and a grace I could not have earned, and a God who was there before I arrived, and will be there long after I am gone. He is not finished with you.